The palace of the Veyari Empire stretched like a mountain of silver and crystal against the skies of Yalora Prime. Its towers shone with pale light, and its gates stood taller than most human starships. For centuries, the Veyari had ruled their sector of the galaxy with dignity, wealth, and pride. Their court was a place where no outsider dared to walk without bowing low. But that day, whispers traveled across the great halls of the palace. Whispers about a human. Captain Marcus Hale of Earth had arrived with a small delegation. He was not a prince, nor a noble, nor even a man of great wealth. He was a soldier, a commander of a single warship, sent by Earth to represent his people in the growing network of galactic diplomacy. Most Veyari nobles barely hid their sneers when they saw him. To them, humans were new, rough, unrefined, and unworthy of standing among ancient houses that traced their bloodlines back thousands of years. Yet Marcus did not walk with shame. He moved with steady steps, his back straight, his eyes calm. He wore no jewels, no flowing robes, only the dark uniform of Earth's stellar command, clean and simple. And in that crowded hall, someone noticed him. Princess Solara, daughter of King Arados of the Veyari, stood at the balcony above the chamber. Her robes shimmered with violet threads, and her crown reflected the starlight through the glass roof. She had been raised among ceremonies, banquets, and endless rituals of tradition. Every suitor she met spoke the same way: empty compliments, cold ambition, and a hunger to be closer to her throne rather than to her heart. But the human was different. She watched him from above as he greeted alien envoys with a firm handshake instead of the long, flowery gestures of the court. He smiled in a way none of her people ever did, open, uncalculated, almost reckless. And when some nobles mocked him under their breath, he ignored them as if their scorn had no weight. Curiosity stirred within Solara. Against the advice of her attendants, she descended the steps and entered the gathering. The moment she approached the human, the hall fell silent. Nobles froze in shock. No princess had ever walked toward an alien outsider like this. Marcus bowed his head slightly, respectful, but not submissive. "Your Highness," he said in a steady voice. Solara tilted her head. "You know who I am?" "I make it my duty to know the names of rulers," Marcus replied. "But more importantly, I prefer to know the names of those who shape the galaxy. You are Solara, daughter of Arados and voice of the Veyari court. That is worth knowing." The princess blinked, surprised. Most suitors called her Jewel of the Empire, Star of the Heavens, or endless other titles that meant little. The human spoke plainly, yet his words carried weight. "You speak differently than others here," Solara said softly. "On Earth, we tend to say what we mean," Marcus answered, a faint smile on his lips. "It saves time." A few nobles gasped at the boldness, but Solara laughed, a genuine laugh, bright and unrestrained. That sound sent murmurs through the hall like a storm. A princess, laughing with a human? They walked together then, speaking, as if no one else existed. Solara asked him about Earth, about its seas, forests, and skies. Marcus told her of storms that could swallow cities, of mountains that pierced the clouds, of deserts that burned by day and froze by night. "Your world sounds dangerous," Solara said, eyes wide. "It is," Marcus admitted. "But danger teaches us how to survive. We grew strong because the world demanded it. We didn't have a choice." Solara looked at him in silence. In her empire, life was comfortable. Too comfortable. The Veyari had grown used to safety, to predictability. She realized in that moment why the human fascinated her. He was a man who had faced storms and walked out stronger, but not everyone shared her wonder. From the far side of the chamber, a sharp voice echoed. "Solara." The king himself entered. Arados, tall and stern, his silver crown gleaming above his dark eyes. His cloak swept across the floor as dozens of guards and advisors followed him. Every noble bowed low, trembling at his presence. Solara straightened but did not step away from Marcus. The king's eyes narrowed. "Why does my daughter stand beside a human?" His voice was quiet, but the entire hall heard it. Marcus held his ground, meeting the king's gaze. "Because she chose to," he said. A ripple of shock spread across the court. No one spoke so directly to King Arados. Solara lifted her chin. Father, Captain Hale is an envoy of Earth. He deserves respect. Respect? Arados's voice turned sharp. Humans are children among the stars. They have no place in the affairs of empires. His gaze turned to Marcus. You forget your station, outsider. You are tolerated here, nothing more. Marcus remained calm. With respect, Your Majesty, humanity does not ask for tolerance. We ask only for honesty. You may call us young, but we are not weak. Solara's lips curved in the faintest smile. The nobles murmured louder, scandal spreading like fire. The king's voice thundered through the hall. You will keep your distance from my daughter. If you forget this again, you will be removed from my court. Marcus bowed his head slightly, showing courtesy without surrender. As you command, Your Majesty. But his eyes lingered on Solara for a heartbeat longer, and she on him. That night the court was alive with whispers. Some called it shameful, others dangerous. But the boldest voice came from Solara herself. She sent word across the palace. At the next great gathering, she would not come alone. When the day came, the nobles filled the grand chamber again. The throne gleamed, the banners of the empire swayed, and the king sat in pride at the center. The doors opened, and Princess Solara entered not with a noble lord at her side, nor with an honored prince from another house. She walked with the human, Captain Marcus Hale, arm in arm. The court froze in stunned silence. The whispers began again, but louder this time, sharp as blades. The king's face darkened, his hand tightening on the throne's armrest. Solara's voice rang clear. I will not hide my choice. I will not be told whom I may or may not speak with. Today I stand with him. The nobles trembled. The court had never seen anything like it. The silence inside the Veyari court did not last long. Whispers turned into loud voices, and voices turned into outrage. Nobles rose from their seats, pointing fingers, their jeweled robes swaying as they demanded answers. An insult, cried Lord Vale, a noble of high standing. The princess dares to walk with a primitive outsider? It is unthinkable. Unworthy of the royal line, another shouted. The grand chamber, normally a place of ordered ceremony, was now a storm. The alien princess, Solara, stood tall in the middle of the storm, her hand still lightly resting on Captain Marcus Hale's arm. She did not flinch from the anger around her. Instead, she lifted her chin, as if daring them to keep speaking. King Arados rose from his throne. His crown gleamed under the light of the great hall, and his eyes burned with restrained fury. The court fell quiet at once, for his presence demanded silence. Daughter, the king said slowly, his voice heavy with warning. What madness is this? Why do you stand with this human in my court? Solara's voice was calm, though her heart pounded. Because he has shown me something I have never seen in our halls. Honesty, courage, a spirit unchained by endless rules and traditions. He does not bow to false words. He speaks with truth. Gasps echoed. The court had never heard a princess speak in such a way, especially against her father's will. The king's gaze turned to Marcus, sharp as a blade. You dare walk beside my daughter as if you belong here. You dare allow her to speak for you. Marcus met the king's eyes without fear. His voice was steady but respectful. With respect, Your Majesty, Solara speaks for herself. I do not command her steps. She chose this path. A murmur rippled through the nobles. Some hissed in anger. Others leaned forward in curiosity. The idea that a princess would choose a human was shocking. Lord Vale stepped forward. This is a disgrace. Your Majesty, remove him at once before the court's honor collapses. The king raised a hand to silence the voices. His eyes never left Marcus. Tell me then, human, you come from a young world, a small world. What makes you think you deserve to stand in the court of the Veyari? The question was meant to crush him. It was the same question the king had used to humiliate envoys from lesser houses for years. The court leaned forward, expecting the human to stammer, to falter, to beg for mercy, but Marcus did not falter. He stood straight, his voice firm. Earth is young, yes, small, yes, but every step of our history was a fight for survival. Our seas are full of storms, our skies strike with lightning, our land shakes with fire from mountains and freezes with ice from the poles. We learned not to wait for safety, but to build it with our own hands. We are not here because life was easy. We are here because we refused to break. The chamber was silent. Even the nobles who despised him listened. His words carried a weight they could not ignore. Marcus continued, his eyes steady. You may call us primitive. You may call us children among the stars. But remember this, children grow. And when they grow, they do not forget those who mocked them. Humanity does not beg for a place in your court. We will carve our place, whether you allow it or not. The silence cracked like glass. The younger nobles exchanged glances, their expressions uncertain. They had never heard such boldness in the presence of the king. Solara's eyes shone with quiet pride. For years, she had listened to suitors speak with careful false words, terrified of offending her father, and yet this human who should have feared more than anyone spoke with truth. The king's jaw tightened. He leaned back into his throne, his voice dark. Bold words, dangerous words. Perhaps your kind truly does not know its place. Solara spoke then, stepping closer to Marcus. Perhaps, Father, it is not humanity that does not know its place. Perhaps it is us who have grown so proud that we cannot see strength when it stands before us. The court erupted in noise. Nobles cried out in protest, some demanding the princess be silenced, others calling for Marcus to be punished, but not all voices were angry. Among the storm there were murmurs of doubt. Some of the younger nobles whispered quietly to one another, questioning the certainty of their empire's arrogance. Could it be true? Were humans stronger than they had believed? The king raised his hand and silence fell again. His voice was thunder. Enough. I will not allow my daughter to be led astray by a human's words. Captain Hale will leave Veyari space at once. If he refuses, he will face consequences. Solara's face tightened. You would send him away because he spoke truth? I would send him away because he is dangerous, Arados said coldly. Dangerous not with weapons, but with his tongue. He poisons with words that do not belong in this hall. Marcus bowed slightly, though his eyes never wavered. If that is your command, I will go. But know this, Your Majesty. The galaxy is changing. Humanity will not hide in the shadows forever. You may send me away, but you cannot stop what is coming. The king's eyes narrowed. Is that a threat? Marcus shook his head. It is a promise. The nobles gasped. Some shouted for the guards to act, but the king, though furious, raised his hand to stop them. He did not want blood spilled in his hall. Not yet. Solara stepped forward. No, Father, I will not allow this. If you send him away, you send me as well. The court froze. The princess had spoken words none dared imagine. To stand against her father in public was unthinkable. Arados's eyes burned. You would defy me? For a human? Solara's voice was steady, her gaze unwavering. I would defy anyone who believes courage. Has no place in this court. If he leaves, I leave. The silence was so deep the nobles could hear their own hearts pounding. The king's hand trembled on the arm of his throne. His power, absolute for centuries, now faced a crack. His own daughter, the jewel of the empire, stood not with him, but with a human. Marcus placed a hand gently over his heart and bowed to Solara. Your Highness, you owe me nothing. This is my burden to carry. But Solara shook her head. No, Captain Hale, it is mine as well. If I do not stand for what I believe, then I am no princess worth remembering. The court was in uproar again. Voices shouted, nobles argued, and guards shifted uneasily. The chamber was chaos. At last, the king slammed his staff against the floor, the sound echoing like thunder. Enough, he roared. If the human wishes to stay, Then let him prove his worth. Let the court see if his words hold weight beyond his tongue. Tomorrow there will be a test. Trials of strength, wit, and endurance. If he succeeds, he may stay a moment longer. If he fails, he will be cast out, and his name erased from our history. The chamber shook with anticipation. A test. A challenge. The human had walked into a storm far greater than he imagined. Marcus's voice was calm as he answered. I accept. Silara's hand tightened on his arm. She knew the trials would not be fair. They would be designed to break him. But Marcus did not waver. The king leaned back on his throne, a thin smile forming. He believed the matter was settled. Tomorrow the human would fail, and the court would be restored to order. But deep within, Arados felt something he had not felt in years. A sliver of unease. For the first time he wondered, what if the human did not fail? The dawn over Yalora Prime painted the skies in gold and silver. The palace towers gleamed, their crystal walls catching the light like frozen fire. But inside the palace the mood was far from peaceful. Word had spread across the empire. The human captain had accepted the king's challenge. By the next sunrise, nobles, warriors, scholars, and even common citizens crowded near the palace arena, eager to see the trial. It had been centuries since such a spectacle was held. Princess Silara stood near the entrance of the arena, her hands clenched together as she watched Marcus prepare. He wore no armor, no heavy plating, only his dark stellar command uniform. Against the grand armor of the Veyari champions, he looked small and fragile, but when Silara looked into his eyes, she saw not fear, but calm determination. Are you certain? She whispered. Marcus gave her a faint smile. On Earth we have a saying. If you step into the storm, you don't turn back just because the wind grows stronger. Her heart tightened. No suitor of the court had ever spoken like this. They hid behind wealth, behind status, behind the shadow of their father's power. But this human, alone in a palace of enemies, stood tall as if the whole galaxy could not move him. The great horns of the arena sounded. The trials were about to begin. The first trial, combat. The floor of the arena shifted, glowing symbols, rising from the stone. Weapons of many kinds, blades, staves, energy spears, appeared from hidden compartments. The first trial was simple, combat. The king's voice echoed through the chamber. Human, you claim strength, prove it. Face our champion. A towering Veyari warrior stepped forward. His skin gleamed with metallic scales, and his armor bore the crest of the royal guard. He lifted a long spear, its tip crackling with blue energy. Marcus did not reach for a weapon. Instead, he studied the arena, his eyes calm, his breath steady. Warrior lunged. The spear thrust forward with blinding speed. The crowd gasped, certain the human would fall in the first strike. But Marcus twisted aside, letting the spear glance past him. He didn't try to match strength with strength. He used speed, agility, and timing. Each time the warrior attacked, Marcus dodged, rolled, or sidestepped. His movements were not graceful like a trained duelist, but practical, sharp, and efficient. Minutes passed and frustration built in the Veyari champion. He roared, striking harder and faster, his spear slashing through the air like lightning. But Marcus kept moving, forcing the giant to waste energy. Finally, Marcus spotted his chance. As the spear slammed down, he grabbed a fallen staff from the ground and jammed it against the shaft of the weapon. With a sudden twist, he locked the spear, yanked hard, and used the warrior's own momentum to throw him off balance. The champion crashed to the ground. The crowd erupted in shock. Marcus did not strike the final blow. He simply stepped back, dropped the staff, and raised his hands. I don't need to win by breaking him. I win by standing when the storm passes. The younger nobles murmured with surprise. For them, victory had always meant domination. For the human, it meant survival. Silara's heart swelled with pride. The second trial. Endurance. The arena shifted again. This time the floor sank, revealing deep pools of water that began to rise. The second trial was endurance. The challengers would be forced to swim against fierce currents in the arena's underground channels. The Veyari prided themselves on their ability to endure long underwater, their lungs adapted for the heavy oceans of their homeworld. To them, this trial would surely crush the human. The horn sounded and Marcus dove into the waters. The current roared, pulling at him like the grasp of a living beast. The Veyari competitors surged ahead with powerful strokes, cutting through the waves. Marcus struggled at first. His strokes were not as smooth, his lungs burned with the pressure. The crowd began to laugh. "The human cannot swim. He will drown." But Marcus did not panic. He adjusted. He angled his body differently, using the current to push him forward rather than fight it directly. Where the Veyari wasted strength pushing against the water, Marcus found paths where the current carried him. He surfaced only for quick breaths before diving again, refusing to surrender. Step by step, breath by breath, he kept moving forward. At last, the horn sounded. The first two Veyari reached the finish, gasping but proud. A third followed soon after. Then, to the crowd's astonishment, Marcus emerged from the waters. His chest heaved, his arms trembled, but he stood tall. He had, not won, but he had endured. Solara's voice rang out before anyone else could speak. He did not quit. Even when the waters tried to break him, he did not quit. That is true endurance. Some of the crowd clapped, hesitant at first, then stronger. For the first time, the human had won not by being first, but by refusing to break. The king's face was stone. He gave no sign of approval. The third trial, the puzzle of wits. The arena shifted one last time. Towers of crystal rose from the floor, glowing with shifting patterns of light. The final trial was one of wits, a puzzle of logic and memory. The challengers were to navigate the towers, unlocking paths by solving sequences of light and sound. The Veyari nobles leaned back with confidence. Surely here their ancient knowledge would shine. What could a human with his young world know of such trials? The challenge began. Competitors rushed into the crystal towers, their minds sharp, their hands moving quickly over the glowing panels. Marcus entered more slowly, studying the patterns. Solara watched closely. He did not rush. He traced the lines with his fingers, muttering softly. His mind worked in ways unfamiliar to the Veyari, less precise, more instinctive. When he made mistakes, he did not despair. He adjusted, tested, tried again, and with every attempt he grew faster. Where others panicked when the towers shifted, Marcus adapted, finding new paths instead of clinging to old ones. At last, after long minutes, he stepped out of the tower's maze. He was not the first to finish, but he was not the last either. He had survived all three trials. The crowd was silent at first, unsure what to make of it. He had not crushed his opponents. He had not defeated them with overwhelming power, yet he had faced every challenge, and he still stood. Solara's voice rang through the arena. You see now. He does not win by being strongest, nor fastest, nor most learned. He wins by never giving in, by refusing to stop. That is why he stands here still. The younger nobles cheered. Some of the older ones frowned, but their voices were drowned by the rising sound of approval. The king rose slowly from his throne. His face was unreadable, but his eyes burned with restrained fury. He had expected the human to fail, to be broken before the court. Instead, Marcus had survived, and worse, he had gained respect. You have passed the trials, the king said at last, his voice heavy. But do not think this makes you one of us. You are still human, still beneath the throne. Marcus bowed, slightly, but his words were calm and sharp. I never asked to be one of you. I only asked to stand as myself, and I have. The court erupted into divided voices, some praising him, others denouncing him, but no one could deny the truth. The human had faced the trials, and he had not been broken. Solara stepped forward then, taking Marcus's hand openly in front of all. Her voice was clear and strong. You tried to shame him, Father. You tried to break him. But he stands and I stand with him. The chamber shook with uproar. Nobles shouted, guards hesitated, the crowd roared. The king's power, once absolute, was being tested in ways it had never been before. The sun rose high over Yalora Prime, its rays reflecting off the crystal towers of the Veyari Palace. Yet inside the grand hall, no light could hide the tension that simmered like molten steel. The trials had ended the day before, and Captain Marcus Hale had survived them all. Every noble, every guard, every member of the court remembered it. The younger nobles whispered among themselves. Some of the older ones shook their heads, unwilling to accept that a human could endure what their best champions could not. The court had gathered again, this time for a formal session. The king would address the results of the trials, and the human who had defied centuries of tradition. King Arados rose slowly from his throne, his silver crown gleaming in the hall. His voice boomed, carrying authority that had never before been questioned. "You have survived the trials," he said, his eyes locking on Marcus. "But do not think that this makes you equal to us. You are a human. You are an outsider. You will never belong to this court." Marcus stood tall, meeting the king's gaze calmly. "I do not seek to belong. I only seek to stand as myself. And that, Your Majesty, is all that I will ask of any court in the galaxy." Solara's hand rested lightly on Marcus's arm. Her violet eyes shone with pride. "Father, you see what others cannot. Strength is not always measured in bloodlines, nor is courage measured in titles. Marcus has shown what your empire has forgotten, that survival, intelligence, and spirit are more important than pride alone." The court murmured, and some nobles shifted uncomfortably. To speak against the king was dangerous. To speak against him in support of a human, dangerous beyond measure. Yet the truth in Solara's words struck a chord even in the most hardened hearts. Arados's face darkened. He stood straighter, his voice sharp. "You would side with a human over your own people?" "I side with truth," Solara said softly, but firmly. "If you punish him, you punish yourself, your court, and the empire. He has done nothing dishonorable. He has only endured, only stood, only survived. And that is worth recognition." The king's hands tightened on the arms of his throne. He could feel the room shifting beneath him. The younger nobles were nodding. Some guards looked uneasy. The human had earned respect, and the princess had chosen to support him openly. "Enough!" Arados roared, trying to regain control. "Marcus, Hale will leave the palace immediately, or he will face punishment. Guards." The guards shifted. Many of them had witnessed the trials. They had seen the human's skill, his calm, his courage. Some of the younger soldiers even admired him. And now, confronted with the king's order, they hesitated. Marcus did not flinch. He stepped forward slightly, bowing his head with respect, but his voice remained calm and steady. "Your Majesty, I am willing to leave if it is your command. But understand this, a command given against the truth carries no honor." The tension in the room thickened. Solara's hand moved to grasp his. She stepped forward. "Father," she said, her voice firm, "I will not allow you to punish him. Not for standing, not for enduring, not for being human. If you force him to leave, then I leave as well, and I will not be alone. Others will follow because the people of this empire understand courage when they see it." The court gasped. Nobles exchanged glances, unsure what to do. The younger guards shifted, murmuring quietly to one another. Even some older nobles, despite their pride, could not help but feel the truth of her words. Arados's eyes narrowed. Rage and disbelief warred inside him. "You would defy me, daughter? In front of the court? For a human?" "Yes," Solara said, her voice steady. "Because he is not just a human. He is a man of courage, of honor, and of spirit. Something your court has forgotten. Something you seem afraid to recognize." The king's voice trembled slightly. This cannot be allowed. I am the ruler of the Veyari Empire. My word is law." Marcus shook his head slightly, not with disrespect, but with understanding. Your Majesty, laws do not create respect. Courage does, honor does, truth does, and those are things that cannot be silenced with threats. The court erupted into whispers. Some nobles moved to the side, murmuring agreement. Others grew angry, demanding Marcus be removed. But the palace guards, once unquestioning in their obedience, now hesitated. They remembered the trials. They remembered how Marcus had faced impossible odds and endured. Many of them could not bring themselves to strike a man who had already proven himself in ways their empire had long forgotten. Solara's eyes scanned the hall. If you move against him, you will be moving against the people of this empire, against the truth, against courage itself. For the first time, the king realized his position was not as absolute as he had believed. His power, forged over centuries, relied not only on fear but also on the obedience of those who followed him. And now that obedience faltered. A hush fell over the court. Even the older nobles, accustomed to the king's word being law, felt a tension in the air they could not name. Aridos's hands clenched into fists. He leaned forward, trying to assert dominance. "Marcus Hale," he said, "I am giving you one final chance. Leave now, or face the consequences." Marcus bowed slightly, his voice calm. "I will not leave, Your Majesty, not because I seek to defy you, but because I will not abandon truth, courage, or honor." The court erupted again. Some nobles shouted in anger, calling for guards to act. Others called for calm, raising voices in support of Marcus and the princess. The hall was chaos, yet amidst it, a clear shift had occurred. Power had begun to tilt. Solara stepped fully beside Marcus, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "Father," she said, "you have always ruled with strength, yes, but strength alone is not enough. Courage, honor, and truth are stronger than fear. If you act against him, you act against those values, and your empire will see that." The younger nobles now stood openly in support. They raised their voices, some bowing slightly in acknowledgement of Marcus's courage. The guards hesitated. Further, the king's words had always been unquestionable, but now, even among those he trusted most, doubt had taken root. King Aridos realized something terrifying. His daughter had not only defied him, she had inspired others to do the same. His orders could no longer be enforced without the risk of open rebellion in the court. The human had done nothing but endure, yet he had shattered centuries of unquestioned authority. Arados's eyes narrowed. He had ruled the Veari Empire for decades. He had never lost control. And yet now, here in his grand hall, he faced a challenge unlike any he had ever known. A human, calm, steadfast, and unyielding, supported by the princess and whispered approval of the court. He stood silently for a long moment, his mind racing. Every option he had relied upon, the threat of punishment, the weight of tradition, the obedience of guards and nobles, had begun to crumble. And the more he hesitated, the more the court shifted toward Marcus. Solara's voice broke the silence. "Captain Hale, will you stand with me?" Marcus's eyes met hers. "Always," he said simply. Then, taking her hand in his, he stepped forward. Together they faced the king and the court. The nobles were silent. Some were awed. Some were terrified, but no one moved to stop them. The king's power, once absolute, had faltered in the face of courage and truth. Arados realized in that instant that he was powerless, not because he lacked strength, but because Marcus had something no throne or army could command: the respect of those who witnessed him and the loyalty of the princess who had chosen to stand with him. The court had changed forever, and Marcus, standing beside Solara, did not need to raise a weapon. He did not need to shout. His presence, his courage, and his unwavering calm had done what centuries of tradition and authority could not. For the first time in his life, King Aridos felt the weight of humility and fear. Because humanity, he realized, was not like the others. Humanity did not yield, humanity did not break, and humanity would not bow. The great hall of the Veari Palace was alive with tension that morning. Yet it was different from the chaos of previous days. The court gathered once more, but this time the nobles moved with caution. Whispers traveled faster than the flowing. Banners. The human captain had survived the trials, and the princess had chosen to stand beside him. King Arados sat on his throne, his expression tight, his eyes burning with frustration. Power that had once been unquestioned now felt fragile. The court had shifted, half still loyal, half swayed by courage and truth. And in the middle of it all, Marcus Hale and Princess Solara stood together, their hands joined, their presence unshakable. The king's voice broke the tense silence. Marcus Hale, human of Earth, you have faced the trials. You have survived. And yet, you have not proven that you belong in this empire. Speak now. Why should I not cast you from my halls and erase your name from our records? Marcus did not bow low. He did not bend. He stood tall, calm, and firm. His voice echoed through the chamber. Your Majesty, I do not seek to belong here. I do not seek a place among your nobles nor the approval of your court. I stand here to prove something far greater, that courage, honesty, and honor matter more than bloodlines or tradition. If those are not enough to earn respect, then I have done all I can. Solara stepped closer to him. Her voice rang clear and strong. Father, this human has shown more strength than any of your suitors, more wisdom than most of your court, and more honor than many who call themselves leaders. He has survived the impossible, and he stands still. That is true victory. The Abba court was silent. Some nobles' faces flushed with anger, while others' eyes widened in awe. Guards exchanged uncertain glances. Even the older, prideful nobles found it difficult to speak against such truth. The king's face darkened. You would defy me, Solara? Stand beside a human in front of all the court? Do you not fear disgrace? I fear nothing but dishonor, Solara replied. And it would be dishonorable to turn away from courage when it stands before us, merely because it wears an unfamiliar face. A ripple of murmurs spread through the chamber. Some younger nobles whispered among themselves, questioning the old traditions. Could it be that their emperor had been wrong to dismiss humanity? Could it be that strength did not always come from power, but from the spirit that refused to break? King Arados's hands clenched on his throne. He had faced wars, rebellions, and threats from rival houses. And yet now a single human, with no fleet, no army, and no noble lineage, had unsettled him more than any of his previous enemies. He rose from his throne, his voice cutting through the murmurs. Enough! This court will obey me. The human will leave. You, Solara, will return to your chambers, and none shall defy my command again. Marcus spoke, his voice calm but strong. Your Majesty, I do not wish to defy you, but understand this. Courage cannot be silenced by threats, honor cannot be erased by law, and truth will always stand, even if kings attempt to crush it. Solara's gaze met her father's. You see, Father, even your words cannot intimidate him. That is why I will not step back. If you force him away, I leave with him, and many others will follow, for the people respect truth, not fear. The court shifted again. Nobles whispered urgently. Guards hesitated, unsure whose command to follow. Some of the older nobles exchanged glances, realizing their authority rested on obedience that could no longer be guaranteed. Arados's voice rose with anger. You would have the court defy me? Stand against me? Solara's hand tightened, over Marcus's. I would have the court stand for what is right, Father. Not against you, but for courage and honor. The chamber was electric. Marcus looked around, seeing hesitation in the guards' eyes, uncertainty in the nobles' faces. He did not raise a weapon, did not shout, did not demand allegiance. He simply stood tall, calm, and unafraid. That alone spoke louder than any speech. The king's lips pressed into a thin line. He had faced opposition before, but never like this. His own daughter had inspired courage in others. His orders could not be enforced without rebellion, and a human, one human, had changed the balance of power in his court. Silence fell. Nobles dared not speak. Guards dared not act. And in that quiet, the truth became clear. The human and the princess were not merely surviving, they were winning. Finally, King Arados spoke, his voice heavy. You stand together, and yet you expect this court to respect your defiance? Marcus met the king's gaze directly. I do not expect respect. I only ask that truth and courage be recognized. That is all I require. Solara stepped fully beside him, raising her voice so all could hear. This court has witnessed the impossible. A human has survived our trials, endured every challenge, and stood unwavering. And I stand with him. If anyone here doubts this, I ask you to look at what courage truly is. A hush fell over the court. Some nobles looked down, their pride unable to meet the truth before them. Others nodded slightly, seeing the strength they had long ignored. Guards relaxed, realizing that action against Marcus would no longer inspire loyalty. They might even spark rebellion. The king's eyes swept the chamber, searching for dissent. There was none. His control had slipped. The power he had held for decades now seemed fragile, almost irrelevant in the face of something he could not command. Human spirit. He sank back into his throne, a deep sigh escaping him. He had faced many enemies, but none had unsettled him like this. None had defied him with courage, honor, and calm. None had earned the loyalty of his daughter, and perhaps of the court itself, without striking a single blow. Solara's eyes glimmered. Father, she said softly, this is not defeat. This is change. Change that our empire needs. We cannot fear the world beyond our stars. We must respect strength when we see it, even if it is unfamiliar. That is what Marcus has shown us. Marcus gave a small nod. I do not seek power over your empire. I do not seek to rule, but I will stand with those who fight for truth and courage, and I will never bow to intimidation. The younger nobles began to applaud, hesitant at first, then louder, stronger, more confident. Some older nobles followed, slowly, their pride yielding to undeniable truth. The hall shook with the sound of approval. The king's face remained stern, but he could not deny it. Humanity had won, not through weapons, not through armies, not through cunning politics, but by standing, by enduring, by refusing to break when the world tried to crush them. Solara raised her hand, and silence fell again. Let it be known, she said, that courage and honor are not bound by species, bloodline, or tradition. Captain Marcus Hale has proven this. He has shown that humanity deserves not fear, but respect. And we will stand by those who embody such strength. The chamber erupted in cheers. Guards bowed, nobles clapped, and the people within the court whispered their admiration. Even the king's closest advisors looked uneasy, realizing the tide of influence had shifted. Arados's crown gleamed in the sunlight. He had ruled for decades, yet here he stood, powerless in the face of something greater than law or fear. And deep down, he knew it. The galaxy would never underestimate humans. Again, Solara squeezed Marcus's hand. You did it, she whispered. You've shown them what I've known all along. Marcus smiled faintly. I only stood. You chose to stand with me. That made all the difference. The king looked at them, and though his lips remained pressed tight, his eyes softened slightly. He had not lost entirely, but he understood now that power was not absolute. True strength, true leadership came from courage and honor, not fear or titles. And for the first time, humanity had proven it before a royal court that thought them weak, unworthy, and insignificant. Marcus did not raise a weapon. He did not claim a throne. He did not demand anything. Yet the court had changed. The younger nobles would carry the story forward. The guards would remember his calm, and the princess herself had chosen to stand openly with him. The king's authority, while still present, had been tested in ways it never had before, and the lesson was clear. Humans did not need fleets or armies to command respect. They only needed courage, honesty, and the willingness to stand when others would falter. The story of that day would be remembered for generations. The human who stood beside a princess, the princess who chose truth over tradition, and the king who learned that power alone could not contain spirit.